They see something a little drier and a little brighter with some sunshine around. Goodbye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. There's £30,000 in tax-free cash to make 2026 the best year yet. A further £10,000 cash to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £1,000 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. And we'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Bold.
They are under no illusion.
Brave.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell.
The BBC is in crisis again. Its Director General and Head of News have both resigned after revelations of a doctored Donald Trump speech. The US President is now threatening a $1 billion, that's £770 million lawsuit. The question is not if the BBC can be saved, but it's if and how the BBC can save itself. Also tonight.
It was a common market. Now it's a European Union that wants an air force, an army, a navy, and wants to militarily intervene.
The EU is reportedly demanding up to £5 billion from Britain in return for access to its rearmament fund after Brexit. Is this a step back under the Brussels yoke under guise of defence? Plus,
British governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. It's quite a characteristic of them.
councils and government departments are still spending your money like it's their own. In Blackpool, a debt-ridden Labour council spends £35,000 on rainbow crossings, while the government sends £20 million to train tax collectors in Ethiopia. Is it time the state stopped wasting your money? And Parliament is also dipping back into the public purse, this time for a giant security fence in the Thames, just months after a £10 million House of Lords security door was installed but didn't work. And a new study, this is really good news, claims heavy drinking in late teens and 20s might actually boost career prospects thanks to alcohol-fueled socialising and networking. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most intellectual panel, the former Conservative MP and Minister, Sir John Redwood, and the former Labour MP and writer of letters to The Times, Stephen Pound. As ever, let me know what you think, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Aaron Armstrong.
Thanks, Jacob. Good evening to you. 2 minutes past 8 here in the GB newsroom. Our top story. Donald Trump has threatened to sue the BBC for $1 million after its chair admitted an error in the editing of a speech by the US president. Mr Trump's legal team's accusing the corporation of defaming Mr Trump and have demanded a retraction, giving the broadcaster until Friday evening to respond. Earlier, the BBC chairman, Samir Shah, apologised to the Culture, Media and Sport Committee for what he called an error in judgment in the documentary, which put two parts of Mr Trump's speech together, so he appeared to explicitly encourage the Capitol Hill riots of January 2021. It's prompted the resignation of the BBC's Director General Tim Davie and its Head of News Deborah Turness, who insists there is no institutional bias at the corporation. Well, in an exclusive interview with The Late Show tonight, Mr Trump's legal team have told GB News why he's taking action.
The president is extremely frustrated, yet adamant in his belief that he is going to hold accountable those that engage in and peddle in false information and untruthful statements. And so he's upset about it for his own benefit and really for the community as a whole, given the fact that institutions such as the BBC have the ability and the free rein to engage in such defamatory conduct.
8 people have been killed after an explosion near a popular landmark in the Indian capital, New Delhi. The police commissioner of the city says it happened just before 7 p.m. local time when a slow-moving vehicle stopped at a red light before it exploded. The blast occurred near the Red Fort, a tourist destination in a densely populated area of the city. Around 20 other people have been injured. Police say the cause of the explosion is not yet known. A second illegal migrant removed under the one-in, one-out deal with France has returned to the UK. The Home Office says he was detained immediately yesterday, having been detected by biometrics, and will be deported back to France as quickly as possible, adding that anyone looking to return to the UK after being removed under the agreement is wasting their time and money. The man was one of almost 400 asylum seekers picked up in the Channel yesterday. The government, though, says his detection proves the scheme is working. A 34-year-old woman has died after being stabbed at a bus stop in Birmingham city centre on Friday night. The victim, who's been named as Katie Fox, was taken to hospital with a serious injury to her neck and later died of her injuries. The 21-year-old Jason Raphael is accused of murdering Miss Fox. He will appear in Birmingham Crown Court on Wednesday. West Midlands Police say that extra officers will be deployed to the city to reassure the public. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been released from prison 3 weeks into a 5-year jail sentence. A Paris court made the decision earlier. The 70-year-old is now under judicial supervision. He's banned from leaving the country. An appeal trial has been set to take place in March. Sarkozy, who led the country for 5 years until 2012, was jailed last month after being convicted of conspiring to raise campaign funds from Libya. He has consistently denied wrongdoing. And the International Olympic Committee is set to announce a blanket ban on transgender women in female competition early next year. Last week, the IOC's medical and scientific director updated the committee after a review of evidence about permanent physical advantages of being born male. However, the IOC says no decisions have yet been taken. Those are your headlines. I'll be back with more at 9. Now it's over to Jacob.
Welcome back to Save the Nation. The BBC is in the midst of another scandal. Last night saw one of the most dramatic moments in the institution's history when both the Director General Tim Davie and the Head of News Deborah Turnis resigned after revelations that a Panorama documentary doctored a speech by Donald Trump to create the impression he was explicitly urging on the Capitol Hill rioters. Here's a reminder of what happened.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
The BBC has admitted that the edit gave the impression of a direct call for violent action, calling it an error of judgment. The internal memo by former BBC employee Michael Prescott also highlighted evidence of bias in BBC Arabic's Gaza coverage, along with debate over impartiality on trans issues, environmental issues and editorial decisions that may have broken the BBC's own guidelines. This afternoon, the scandal escalated further as Donald Trump wrote to the BBC threatening a £770 million defamation lawsuit under Florida law if it does not issue a full and proper apology, claiming the doctored clip caused overwhelming financial and reputational harm. So is it too late to save this once great institution? Could this be the scandal that topples the BBC? For years, sceptics have said that the BBC has adopted a narrow metropolitan worldview and has become increasingly detached from the majority of the country that it purports to serve. The BBC has consistently denied these claims, insisting it has no institutional ideology and no monolithic culture. But this series of mistakes, controversies and upheld complaints has weakened denials and damaged public trust. When an organisation funded by the licence fee, a tax paid by the public under threat of legal penalty, makes high-profile editorial errors, it's much more consequential than a small human error made in other newsrooms. It compromises confidence in the very notion of a national broadcaster. More importantly, it must be asked, is it now clear that the licence fee mode is suffocating the BBC by protecting it from competition, innovation and accountability? The BBC of 30 years ago was a global titan of broadcasting, admired worldwide for its standards and reputation. But guaranteed funding has dulled its incentive, allowing for cultural drift and internal reform becoming harder in competitive markets. If the BBC were ever to regain trust, it must embrace commercialisation, effectively ownership by licence fee payers through elective subscription or membership, where audience choose to support it voluntarily, where revenue depends on performance, and where impartiality isn't just an ambition, but an economic necessity for improvement. And importantly, commercialisation doesn't mean abandoning what the BBC excels at. Despite its crises, the BBC has some remaining strengths. Assets, such as the iPlayer, already give the BBC a chance to thrive in a competitive market if it is willing to adapt and if it welcomes commercialisation rather than hiding behind a taxpayer-funded income. So the question is not, is it too late to save the BBC? The real question is the BBC willing to save itself? As always, send me your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now I'm joined by my most intellectual panel, John Redwood and Stephen Pound. Stephen, I think the licence fee has crippled the BBC. If you go back to 1990, the BBC had, in inflation-adjusted terms, £3.5 billion worth of revenue. It's grown by about £2 billion. Sky had about £200 million worth of revenue, again, inflation-adjusted. It now has £10 billion. Netflix, which has £30 billion, didn't even exist. And the BBC, with this secure funding, hasn't innovated and it's fallen behind. So I would take the licence fee away as quickly as possible.
Well, if I can address another great and much-loved international institution on this particular one, what I'd like to say, I agree, I think the complete opposite of what you say there. Look, the BBC, and I think the Martine Croxall story, which is probably more indicative of this kind of a groupthink and a bias within the structure of it, is one thing. But this particular thing about the Trump speech, look, first of all, the BBC didn't make that Panorama program. It was made by a company called October Films, I think. Because the BBC has been forced into more and more commercialisation, they've had to outsource. There used to be a chap called John Ware, who used to produce Panorama. Don't forget, Panorama's been going since 1953.
Well, where Richard Dibbleby did the famous spaghetti trees. It's a flagship of the BBC.
But Jacob, the BBC has been forced to become more and more commercial, more and more outsourcing. Now, you can always say, if you get another company to make this, and it's what they call Franken-edit, where they Frankenstein edit bits together, then you might say the BBC should actually, do a due diligence after. But if you're trying to save money, and that's what the BBC have been told to do. However, I think perhaps there's a common ground we can agree. Tim Davie, at 1 year, earned £634,000 a year. We paid him that. I think the BBC has grown bloated in certain areas. It's allowed an institutional ethos, which is inimical to most of the people in this country, to take over, as in the Martin Croc sort of thing. So the BBC we cannot have the King's speech sandwiched in between adverts for stair lifts and holidays in southern Spain. We can't have the last night of the proms and the Armistice Day. We can't have that commercialised. We have to have a national broadcast, but it must be a slimmer, meaner and more accountable.
The broadcasters that take advertising don't put advertising in the middle of the 2-minute silence.
Of course they do. Given half the chance,
they do not. And we don't. When we're taking important breaking political news, we have no adverts for that period. And when we're showing things like the coronation, we have no adverts for that period, likewise ITV. So I think your fears are exaggerated.
Well, I don't know. I just think I want to have a reliable, trustworthy national broadcaster. At the present time,
we haven't got one.
Well, dream on, yes. No, I mean, it's a disgrace what has now been revealed, and Michael Prescott's report is a very good report. I'm glad the Telegraph have allowed us to read it, and they do not know what impartiality means. I mean, this programme, and GBNews generally, puts on sensible views which the BBC would regard as completely unreasonable. I mean, I'm not allowed to go on to the BBC and explain about the Bank of England losses or explain the idiocy of net zero policies that result in more CO2.
But you're on the Today programme loads of times, John.
No, I'm not at all.
No, you used to be.
But they don't want those views, and these are mainstream views that maybe more than half the British public subscribes to, and news stories that you hear break, which they would dream of touching. But you're right about relative scale. The BBC is terribly small now in world terms. I mean, Comcast, America's biggest broadcaster, has a turnover of $130 billion compared with the $7.7 billion of the total BBC. And the BBC has a commercial arm because all of non-UK, the world's their oyster, is meant to be commercial. It has a turnover of a measly £2 billion. Spin it off, let it raise some serious money, make it a flagship for Britain commercially. What's wrong with that idea?
There seems to me to be absolutely no excuse for BBC Online, its website, and the iPlayer not being commercial.
Well, of course
that's
not,
an
but certainly globally.
Yeah.
Global BBC could be a great brand, but it's nowhere near competing. America has, 6 or 7 companies, all with 30 billion plus turnovers, and BBC Commercial has 2 billion.
Look, can I speak for the Conservative interest here? The idea of a headlong rush into commercialisation, where the value is irrelevant and the price is everything, it's actually inimical to what we try to do in this country. The BBC is the biggest soft power developer that we have in this country. You go to Nigeria, go to any country in the world, look at what we're doing in Tehran, we look at Iran, we're the sole voice of reason and sanity.
But it doesn't bring us jobs or money. We just demonstrated
we don't broadcast
$2 billion doesn't buy anything.
I'm sorry.
Rachel Rees can spend that in a day.
I'm sorry. We do actually get a tangible benefit from that soft power. The British brand, the British language and the British standard that we're exporting to the world.
We share it with America, believe it or not.
There's a bit of a difference between us and the Americans.
But this has been busted by this recent story on the American president, hasn't it? That if they make fake news, then they don't have a global standing, because people say, well, why should I believe anything the BBC says?
No, I agree, which is why when John Ware used to make those programmes in Panorama about Northern Ireland, and they were rigorously examined, because that was a BBC in-house production. Nowadays, you actually source it out, and it's much, much more difficult.
Well, no, you can supervise a contractor, and if the contractor doesn't give you impartiality, you don't pay them, and you get a contractor who can give you
twice then, aren't you?
Being in that sort of relationship is easier.
Did a TV programme last year with Discovery. And yes, they had a contractor who made the programme, but Discovery were on top of it the whole way through. They were taking a close interest in what was happening. I know that the production company was regularly reporting to Discovery about what they were doing, what they were filming, and Discovery was saying, well, we want this, and so on.
So it was an artificial cost then? It was artificial? Of course it was.
No, it's not.
If it wasn't cheaper, they wouldn't do it that way.
That's right. It's an efficient way of doing it, but it doesn't mean you give up control.
Well, the impression I got on this, and it's very hard to defend this. I mean, Donald Trump did actually say that it's about fight like hell, and it was an hour and 10-minute speech. Or
yes,
something.
but not in that context.
No, I agree that was wrong. But what I'm saying is, had the BBC themselves in-house done that, I think it would have been a different result.
But I think that's the biggest concern politicians always have. All three of us prefer to do live interviews to pre-records, because we've always known that the BBC could clip a pre-record, and we've always been, all of us have been cautious about that for that very reason.
And what the BBC now does is they interview me in advance and then decide that my views are too moderate and sensible, and then they cancel the engagement.
So you need to do live engagement, because otherwise you either get censored or you can be clipped. And this is not a new problem in broadcasting. It's just on this occasion the BBC has been completely caught out. And it proves what people like me have been saying for some time. There is a bias in the BBC. They don't like Donald Trump. They're very keen on net zero. They're not that keen on the state of Israel, and they hated Brexit. And all this comes through in the way they put their...
And you didn't mention the Martine Croxall. When she was told as a newsreader to read out this thing about pregnant people, and she said, women, and rolled her eyes. Now, that is an institutional bias, because guess who complained? 20% of the complaints were from within the BBC itself. That worries me a damn sight more than upsetting Mr Trump.
But then you're making our point for us. You are saying that there is an institutional problem.
I'm not saying the BBC is perfect. I'm saying the BBC is perfectible.
No, but that's an institutional issue, and it reflects all these others.
There is also a counter-argument that Martine Croxall should have actually read what was on the autocue, because it's not the job of a presenter, of a newsreader, to actually impose her own views and opinions. In this particular case, I think all three of us would agree she was right.
Well, the best thing would have been if she'd gone through the script beforehand and sorted it out with whoever did draft it.
But
I can't argue against
that. Sometimes scripts change at short notice, so I think we can defend her. And I think the phrase pregnant people was against BBC policy in the first place. So whoever wrote it was like, well, we will no doubt find out.
It's good to hear you speak up for Auntie.
Well, I'm very glad there is somebody who doesn't read out nonsense.
I try and avoid speaking out nonsense, but the next thing I've got to read out is thank you to my panel, which I say with utter sincerity. In a moment.
40 years ago, it was a common market. Now it's a European Union that wants an air force, an army, a navy, and wants to militarily intervene.
The EU is reportedly demanding up to £5 billion from Britain in return for access to its rearmament fund after Brexit. Is this a step back into the Brussels yoke under the guise of defence?
Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray, are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
There's a lot of tables out there that won't just have turkey on it. There'll be turkey and ham, and but I know some people that will cook 3 or 4 different meats. And obviously the joy of having turkey is that you can then make a turkey curry for Boxing Day and the subsequent days. So, you should be having days of curry after your turkey lunch. I think for the masses, it's still hugely popular. Through the festive period at the Dog, we will have hundreds of people having Christmas parties, and most of them will order our turkey lunch or dinner. And then Christmas Day, we could sell it probably 3 or 4 times. The demand for people to go out for the traditional turkey roast is still massive. But hey, look, if you don't like a roast lunch, then why force yourself to have it on the, probably one of the most important meals of the day in terms of bringing family together.
What about Sophie's point, Mark, about cost and spending £30, £40 on turkey? That is simply too expensive for lots of people.
Yeah, I'll never be able to defend or debate that. I know more than anyone the challenges around food inflation, and a good turkey has become a huge cost. But I still think where people can afford the tradition, the joy of coming together, sharing a big turkey roast meal it's a brilliant Christmas tradition. But yeah, the food inflation, that's something we've talked about a number of times, isn't it? You know, it's crippling our business and it's crippling people at homes. I suppose the key thing to look at is if you know what you're doing with it, a good turkey will feed the family for many days. It's not just one meal.
GB News, the People's Channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg. We were talking about the BBC, and the mailmogs have come in strongly. Graham says, I think like many institutions, the police force and NHS included, the BBC has become far too infected by left-think ideology, and none of these institutions can ever mend their ways. We must rebuild them all from the ground up. And James said, we need to talk about the international reputational damage to the UK. The BBC is supposed to represent our country to the world and has dragged us through the mud of late. It would be an injustice if the BBC continued in anything like its current form. And Linda says, throughout my adult life, I've always paid my TV licence. My question is, if this diabolical editing of a speech by Donald Trump is proved true, surely the BBC is in breach of mine and every other licence payer's consumer rights. Oh, you should report them to the local trading standards office and see what happens. Doubt very much, but it's worth trying. According to reports, the European Union is set to ask the UK for up to £5 billion in exchange for wider access to its £125 billion rearmament fund. The deal would allow British defence giants such as BAE Systems to bid for up to 50% of EU weapons contracts, but only if the UK contributes and accepts a £120 million administrative fee. Europhiles claim such a deal could boost Britain's defence industry and the economy. But after Brexit, which promised to stop large payments to the EU, is the government taking Britain back into the EU by stealth, this time through the veil of defence? Well, I'm very pleased now to be joined by the former Defence Secretary, Geoff Hoon. Geoff, thank you for joining me. It seems to me very odd that if people want to buy defence equipment, they should be asking the person who would be selling it to them, who you assume is selling good defence equipment, to pay billions of pounds for it. I can see you might ask for a discount. That's perfectly reasonable business sense. But I don't see why we should pay to fund them as well as ourselves.
I don't think we're being asked to do that. We're being asked to contribute to a fund that will allow for British business in particular to benefit from a significant amount of money that the EU is proposing to spend on defence at a critical time in Europe's history when there are a variety of threats to our safety and security. It seemed to me entirely sensible for the EU to take this initiative, and secondly, even more sensible for Britain to be part of it.
Well, it's clearly sensible for Britain to buy more defence equipment, but if there's £6 billion going, shouldn't we be buying more defence equipment with it rather than giving it to the EU? And we might buy that from the Americans or from our own supplies. And that if the EU is purely doing this as a make-work scheme for EU companies, it won't get the equipment it needs.
I don't see it like that, and this is access to a fund of 150 billion euros. So we're talking about an enormous amount of money compared to the opening bid in the negotiations, which is from 4 to 6 billion euros, which the EU have suggested. So there's a huge opportunity here for British business, particularly for companies like BAE Systems, who are a European leader in defence equipment. Something like 130,000 jobs in the UK depend on BAE Systems, similarly Rolls-Royce, similarly Babcock. These are Europe-leading businesses, and it would be a terrible mistake if we did not give them access to this fund, which after all will be available to French companies, to German companies, to a range of other companies across the EU. We have an opportunity here to help British business, help British employment. It really is sensible to take advantage of it.
The bit I don't follow is if the equipment that's being made by BAE Systems, etc., is the best equipment and the equipment that is needed, it will be bought anyway. Or is this fund a fund to buy second-rate equipment that people are prepared to subsidise? Because that seems to me a really deeply mistaken policy.
But this depends on the size of the market. And part of the problem that the UK faces after Brexit is that we identify a relatively small market. And given the amount of research and development that's necessary for defence equipment, it's obviously important that we should be able to sell in that larger EU market. And I'm not saying that it's not possible to develop some equipment purely for the UK, but it's enormously beneficial if we can develop equipment that can be used across the whole of the European Union. And that's really the purpose of this fund, to ensure that Europe is capable of developing the right kind of equipment to support forces across the continent. That seemed to me wholly sensible.
But it seems very odd you need to pay into a fund to do this. Surely this is routine defence procurement, that we've had the Eurofighter and things like that, where we've done deals with other militaries across the EU, we've done deals with other militaries across the world to fund development for committed sales. That's a perfectly routine business activity where the Ministry of Defence has had control over the expenditure. Why should we give this money into a fund? I don't see the point of a fund. I absolutely accept that you want to defray cost by developing things with your allies.
As I understand it, the money available will be at a very favourable interest rate. The EU is able to secure funding at a much better rate than individual countries, and therefore the money that is available to UK business, I anticipate, would likely be used for research and development, for producing a leading-edge equipment using the very latest technology. That's something that's always difficult when the size of the market in the UK is relatively small. So having access to that much bigger market, and part of this does assume that there will be a co-production, that there will be deals done between different countries in the way that you rightly set out in relation to Eurofighter. MBDA is another major European company that is partly owned in the UK, partly owned in France, partly owned in Italy. So these are businesses that have long since abandoned national markets and are working towards international European markets in this case.
So this is a speculation on the interest rate charged to the EU to borrow, which ought logically never to be lower than the best credit state within the Eurozone. And from a sterling point of view, as any commitment we make will be in sterling, we're either taking currency risk or interest rate risk. So I still don't see why we would want to put money into a fund.
Well, if the rate is sufficiently low and lower than is available to a British company otherwise...
But it can't be, because we're talking about different currencies, and if we were to borrow in sterling, which we do, the British state is the cheapest borrower in sterling by definition. If it's then putting that money or borrowing euros, it takes an exchange rate risk which militates against lower interest rates. And that's very bad, dodgy type of financing, as you know perfectly well.
I understand the point you're making, but what I'm saying is, so long as the discrepancy between the two rates is sufficiently large, then it's still in Britain's interest to take that currency risk, and there is obviously a risk involved, and to support British business by having access to this funding. I do think it's about making sure that British defence companies, and they are leading European companies as well as British companies, do have access, are able to compete alongside their competitors in France and Germany and elsewhere. To cut us off from this fund would, I think, be a very damaging aspect for British business and for British employment.
All right, well, Jeff, thank you very much for joining me. Coming up in just a moment.
Socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. It's quite a characteristic of them.
Blackpool, a debt-ridden socialist council, spends £35,000 on rainbow crossings, while the government sends £20 million to train tax collectors in Ethiopia. Is it time the state stopped wasting your money?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. We've got some heavy rain moving back into parts of Spain and Portugal the next few days. Some showers towards Turkey as well. But in between some sunny spells, risk of some rain moving into Madeira come Tuesday, and that rain finally approaching western parts of Portugal later on in the day. But elsewhere across the Mediterranean, generally dry with some sunny spells, though showers moving from Greece into Turkey through the day. Some of these could be heavy at times, and the outlook is for it to be largely dry with sunny spells, temperatures near average.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Evening, more wet and windy weather to come tomorrow, especially in western parts where we have Met Office yellow warnings in place for the rainfall. Mild for many, although it is turning a bit colder tonight. The wet and windy weather tomorrow coming from this area of low pressure. This one's been bringing plenty of rain through the day today. Still some heavy downpours across northeast England, southeast Scotland this evening, but they're heading away out into the North Sea. A few showers across the southeast, but many places becoming dry and clear for a time. But here comes that next weather system bringing rain to Northern Ireland, West Wales by dawn, and the winds strengthening here too. Mild again in the southwest, but elsewhere a pretty chilly night actually, certainly compared to recent nights, and pockets of frost likely in northeast Scotland in rural areas. But should be a bright enough start here, dry and fine. We'll see some sunny spells, just a few showers in western Scotland. But head further south, the cloud already thickening, turning wet across Dumfries and Galloway for the morning rush hour. Really soggy start for Northern Ireland, and heavy bursts of rain covering much of Wales and western England too. Much of the East Midlands and East Anglia in the southeast will have a dry and generally dry, fine start, which will continue for most of the day. But the winds will be picking up in the west. Have Met Office warnings in place for South Wales, southwest Scotland, and for the afternoon southwest England, with another pulse of rain coming in here. We also have to keep an eye on Northern Ireland because again here the ground is very wet, so more rain could also cause some flooding issues here. Much of northern Scotland stays dry on the chilly side here, but elsewhere it is, again, pretty mild with temperatures into the teens. The rain continues through the evening. A lot of spray surface water on the roads for Tuesday evening's rush hour. Yellow warnings remain in place across the west too. That rain continues northwards, grinds to a halt on Wednesday across the far north. Further showery rain in the south, but in between we should on Wednesday see something a little drier and a little brighter with some sunshine around. Goodbye.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Councils and government departments are spending your money as if it's going out of fashion. In Blackpool, a debt-ridden Labour council has come under fire for spending more than £35,000 on LGBT-themed rainbow crossings and is now facing possible legal action over claims it breaches rules on political neutrality. And another example of overseas aid madness, the UK government is squandering £20 million to train tax collectors in Ethiopia as part of a Foreign Office scheme which has been accused of helping foreign businesses while taxpayers at home face rising bills. Is it time that states stopped wasting your money? Well, I'm joined now by the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, and my most intellectual panel, Sir John Redwood and Stephen Pound. Mark, thank you for coming in. Marvellous, isn't it, that they can spend £35,000 brightening up Blackpool, not with illuminations, but with multicoloured zebra crossings?
There's obviously a large amount of money to go around, Jacob. No need to put taxes up in the budget later this month, one would think, wouldn't you? Look, when you look at these sort of numbers, they are small beer in terms of the overall public finances. £36,000 is not sufficient to close Blackpool Council's deficit. But it speaks to a kind of misguided and reckless way in which money's being spent. Let's suppose you thought painting zebra crossings in the rainbow flag was a good use of public funds. They've only managed to do 6 zebra crossings for £36,000. Who's painting them? Leonardo da Vinci for that sort of price? Unbelievable.
David Hockney, sure.
David Hockney. I mean, they must have hired the best artist in the world. And on the Ethiopian scheme, £20 million to improve tax collection in Ethiopia, whilst HMRC can't answer telephone calls in the first 10 minutes in which people are getting through. The Ethiopian scheme, by the way, the claim made for it is that it will improve tax collection in Ethiopia by £295 million. So presumably they're going to pay it back if this is management consultancy, but I don't believe for a minute that they will.
Isn't the attitude to using public money fundamental that if you waste £35,000 or £20 million, that's going to run through the whole of your accounts, and that means you will be spending far too much doing stupid things? And the way the public finances are at the moment, we need to re-examine what the state does and not just say, oh, it doesn't really matter, it's a small amount. We need to focus on everything.
You're absolutely right. So, I mean, it was the Taxpayers Alliance who managed to unearth this example about Ethiopia. Again, 20 million. Even if you save that, the public finances are in jeopardy. But the point is, it speaks to a culture of waste. If you want to start looking at big numbers, we discovered just a couple of days ago, the NHS has spent £1.4 billion, £1.4 billion, on trying to hit its carbon net zero targets and hasn't reduced its carbon footprint at all. I mean, 1.4 billion completely wasted. So riven throughout the public sector is, it seems, people don't care about spending other people's money on other people. It just doesn't have the discipline that you'd expect to find in the private sector. And I think these egregious, ludicrous examples are helpful because they speak to a wider pattern of financial mismanagement.
And how would you challenge it? Because the Labour Council in Blackpool is democratically elected. It was a Conservative council. Haven't the people of Blackpool said, this is how we want to spend our money by that vote?
Well, ultimately, you've got to challenge it at the ballot box, haven't you? So I suspect this is unhelpful coverage for Blackpool Council. But if the good people of Blackpool decide that they actually want their council tax to go up higher still in order that more zebra crossings can be painted with the rainbow flag, they're entitled to make that expression at the ballot box. So I think calling out these appalling misuses of public money is helpful. I don't think the Labour-run Blackpool Council will be thinking they've had a great day in public relations and their vote at the next local elections is likely to increase.
Well, we've got a wonderful announcement from them, which people will be waiting for. But, Stephen, let me bring you in, because it's a Labour Council, you're a Labour man. Do you think this is how public money should be spent?
Can I just say, there've been many moments watching GB News which I shall treasure till my dying day. One of them is the way that you pronounce LGBT. It was magnificent, if I may say. That's almost an oratorio on itself. But look, let's get a couple of things straight. Firstly, when reform swept through the nation, picking up councils left, right and centre from Lincolnshire to Kent, they immediately said they're going to set up a Department of Government Efficiency. Where is it? Where is this? Where is this great fat and waste in local government? Because if it was there, Kent County Council wouldn't be putting their council tax up by 5%.
I think, John, that it's actually unfortunate the reform councillors have gone native. I had the head of Staffordshire Council on last week, and he said they'd saved £4.5 million, which they were going to repurpose, not give back to taxpayers. So I think it's a broader problem. I think it's the entitlement within the public sector and the bureaucracy feeling it's their money, very much to Mark's point.
Yes, I think the voters definitely voted for reform and, in some cases, Conservative councils to control spending. But so far, these reform councils have allowed their officers to carry on as if nothing has changed. There doesn't seem to be any connection between the councillors' undoubted wish to control spending and what is happening. I read quite a few of their consultation documents. They're all talking about spending pressures and needing to spend more as if nothing had changed, and they're all talking about 5%, in some cases, up to 10% by way of a tax increase from councillors who said we could do it for something better value. But all these councillors are officer-driven, and they're very wokish, and they work very closely with rather wokish officials in government departments and trot out with all these schemes that most people think are a complete waste of time. And I got bigger ones locally than your recent one today. I mean, $5.5 million in my local area, badly misled council by the Liberal Democrats, was spent on painting leaves on a roundabout, not normal highway signs, taking away all the evidence that it was a normal roundabout, and leaving people to get on with it in a very dangerous way. And the local community was livid about that. And they immediately voted in 3 Conservative councillors in that ward, but the damage was done, and these people will go on and do more.
But Johnny, here's an odd thing. Hounslow Borough Council 6 years ago started painting their zebra crossings or their pedestrian crossings in rainbow colours. Those wards increased their Labour majority. In Southall, in my part of the world, we've now got signs in Hindi and Punjabi and Urdu, particularly on Southall Station. It doesn't just say Southall Station, it actually says it in Punjabi. And the local people not only approved of that, but they doubled the number of votes that the Labour government did. I think the problem here is a disconnect between what people in an ideal world say, oh, yes, I'd quite like to have rainbow crosses, or I'd like to have Punjabi street signs, and the actual consequences at the ballot box. And they say that's where the disconnect seems to be.
But I've got an example where it actually worked at the ballot box, but only at a ward level. But I think you're right. You've got to make it work at the ballot box.
Nobody cares about local government, so the votes aren't to do with what's going on locally. They are protesting against a Labour government or a Tory government. And therefore local government just gets worse and worse.
That's true, and it's also true that national government has put on local government shoulders social care and kids with special educational needs that can chew up a huge part of the budget because national government hasn't worked out how to fund that. So actually, the margin that you discretionary got to play with in local government is considerably smaller than the overall budget would indicate. Nevertheless, look, to Stephen's point, if a local council puts up some decent signage and gets an electoral reward for that, fine. I would actually rather, if we're going to have these obligations on local government, like kids with special needs and social care, that should be national government expenditure rather than just shuffling it onto local government. And then local councils can be judged about their discretion of preposterously painting roundabouts full of leaves or all the rest of it. And the ballot box will be the determinant rather than central government.
But they could also be made to be accountable for what could be local services. The idea of that social services being local is they will know about it. We've got examples of a council taking by taxi somebody many miles away and somebody coming in the opposite direction by a very expensive taxi. Why is that?
We're going to have to move on because
towers of Milton Keynes.
All right, we've got to move on because we've got a really exciting statement from Blackpool Council where a spokesman said the crossings were part of a wider plan to regenerate the area after the community told us they wanted the area to be brighter and create a sense of community. The crossings were funded from a pot, could only be used. Doesn't make sense, but never mind, it is what they said. Could only be used to improve public spaces. The crossings remain clearly identifiable as zebra crossings. They also incorporate a range of safety features, including tactile paving services, crossing controls, push buttons, and tactile cones on the control boxes. I didn't think you had controls for zebra crossings, but never mind. That's all very odd, and it was also illiterate. Never mind. Thank you very much to Mark Littlewood and to my panel in a moment. Parliament is dipping back into the public purse, this time for a giant security fence in the River Thames, just months after a £10 million House of Lords security door was installed, which didn't work. And a new study, Good News, claims heavy drinking in late teens and 20s might actually boost career prospects.
We love Great Britain. We love its history, its culture and its tradition, and that's why we're so proud to be part of GB News.
You look genuinely emotional. Oh, come here.
GB News does pay attention to those who are ignored by the mainstream media. The majority of this country whose forefathers fought and died to maintain liberty, to fight for freedom of speech.
The rule of law, the rights of property and democracy. This is the heritage that our country should be so proud of.
Which of course includes our Christian heritage. There's been a huge resurgence in the number of people going to church. Perhaps they're not finding what they're looking for, and they're looking for something a bit deeper, a bit more truthful, a bit more akin to Britain's Christian heritage.
That's right, get ready, because the most exciting night in general election history starts now!
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m.
only on GB News.
Parliament is reaching for the public chequebook again after spending £10 million on a new House of Lords security door that doesn't work and prison-like bars around Old Palace Yard. Officials are now drawing up plans for a giant security fence in the River Thames, complete with riverbed pillars that may partially block access to Westminster Bridge. And a new study suggests that heavy drinking in late teens and 20s may actually boost education and career prospects. Researchers say alcohol-fueled socialising and networking can help with getting ahead through health, though health gurus maintain alcohol is bad for us. Well, over to my panel. There is a link, of course, between Parliament and drinking, that people get into bars in Parliament. But these new bars around Old Palace Yard really make the House of Lords look like a prison.
Well, I obviously got it wrong in my youth. I didn't drink enough, did I? But I think some of our former colleagues came very badly adrift by getting too well acquainted with the bars.
Too well acquainted with the bars.
Well, there's hardly any bars left now. You know, in my day, when I was first elected, we had Annie's bar, and we had, didn't just have the Strangers and the Lord's bar and the Bishop's bar. There's but Bellamy's. There's about 11 bars. I think there's 2 now. It's ridiculously abstemious, and people drink water in there.
Well, nobody can get in anymore because of this security.
Well, are you sure it's to keep people out, or is it to keep the MPs in?
I don't know, but the thing that worries me is that Parliament is there for the British people, and that people ought to be able to get in, and it ought to be...
And then take nice photographs. I mean, I think it's awful now that visitors, peaceful visitors, just want to enjoy their day in London, and they can't get a shot of the palace.
And it's partly what we're talking about the bureaucracy taking over, that there has to be a balance between security and people being able to get to their Parliament. And currently, the bureaucracy is in charge, and it's always going for the lowest risk option.
But why didn't the MPs hit back? I mean, I'm absolutely scandalised by what they've done. It must have been extremely expensive. It's extremely ugly. And I think the security was pretty good before they put all that in.
But we all know every single man, woman and child in this country can come in and lobby their Member of Parliament.
Rightly so.
A green card. The fact that the MP is not often there is neither here nor there. But they can still come in. Look, I think the problem is, after Joe Cox and David Amis, it is something we have to actually get a balance. I think possibly we've gone too far in the wrong direction. Yeah. And don't forget, the Thames is controlled, but by a specific, special police force.
Yes. And they could patrol it more carefully.
I'm not entirely... If Al-Qaeda tried to sail a frigate, up from Dover, I don't think they'd get very far.
All right, but now let's move on to the drinking, because I have brought in some martini glasses, and I thought we might look at how to make the perfect martini. So I have with me a shaker, as you can see.
Is that the Jacob shaker?
It's not, actually. It's my wife's. It's a Fitzwilliam shaker.
It's very elegant.
It's very elegant. I've got a great
Jacob shaker
pocket of ice. So you fill it with ice.
Wonderful.
Tell me, Stephen, about your misspent youth drinking. Listen, I'm spilling some ice on the floor. you fill it with ice. But Stephen, you were...
Well, I have to say, but back in my early days, when I was in the Navy, I was too young for the rum ration. So my mother used to get a large sum of money, about 4 and 6 a month, in lieu of the rum ration.
In lieu of the rum ration.
Although I was issued with 100 senior servers with a blue line on them, so they couldn't be resold.
Come on,
for your perfect martini, you have to fill with ice the decanter, and then you put in a tiny, tiny amount of vermouth, just a bit of a capful, not too much, because it's not that nice vermouth, really. And you shake it in the ice.
Their shares have just plunged.
And then you tip out the vermouth so that you don't get too much. And then you put in the gin. And the gin, this is why I brought a large bottle of Boodle's gin, as it happens. This is a demonstration just to reassure people that
there are other gins available.
There are other gins available, and I'm not going to get my wonderful panel blotto by giving them martinis.
So we're not going to get on in the world.
You're not going to get on in the world.
No,
and then
well,
you shake it.
Typical, isn't it?
And you shake it, shaken not stirred, in the best Bond fashion.
Very good.
And then you pour it out. You see, you need
Wonderful.
a twist. I haven't provided the twist.
No lemon.
Ought to make the ice with mineral water. This isn't mineral water ice.
We supply our own lemon.
Apologise for, because it gets cloudy if it's from ordinary tap water ice. So you now put in your twist.
No olive.
Or olive, if you prefer. I go for a twist of lemon.
Oh, you like a dirty martini?
But more fashionable people go for an olive. So
are you accusing me
the
of being
leader
fashionable?
of fashion goes for an olive.
I would want lemon.
And then you get a beautiful martini. As I say, this is a demonstration, but cheers to all our viewers, and encourage you to have a healthy drink, a healthy approach to booze. Don't be too much of an old sober sides. That is the lesson
I say
of
that's
today.
quite invigorating, isn't it?
Very good.
Stephen is invigorated, John is invigorated, the brain power of England has improved.
It's surging.
Most intellectual panel. Well,
Can we do it again?
We'll do it next week. Today marks the feast of Pope St. Leo the Great, one of the most influential leaders in the history of the Catholic Church. Serving as Pope from 440 to 461, he is remembered for his defence of doctrine, famously asserting the authority of the papacy at the Council of Chalcedon in 451. Stephen and I were both there. He guided the Church through difficult times, negotiating to protect Rome from invading forces. A renowned theologian, diplomat and shepherd, Pope St. Leo's writings on courage, wisdom and the enduring power of moral leadership continue to influence Christianity today. Unfortunately, there's no evidence he ever visited Somerset, which was something of a mistake on his part. Anyway, that's all from me. Up next, it's the one and only Patrick Christys. Patrick, which great saint are you going to be talking about today? St. Patrick, I would have thought.
Absolutely. I just embody him. That's the point of it. So, yes, there we go. Loads coming your way this evening. Sir Keir Starmer, I think, has some brass neck laying a wreath at the cenotaph when his government is prosecuting veterans, and his veterans minister has normally no idea how many homeless veterans there are. The one-in, one-out, hokey-cokey migrant, there's another one that's come back after we deported them. And, of course, we've got the BBC scandals, haven't we, that's going on. Lisa Nandy, the Culture and Media Secretary, says she's going to war with GB News. Well, good luck, Ms Nandy. I have a feeling that we'll be around a lot longer than you. All that and much more next.
Today's outlook: cool, calm and completely horizontal. Boxed Aircon sponsors the weather on GB News.
Evening, more wet and windy weather to come tomorrow, especially in western parts where we have Met Office yellow warnings in place for the rainfall. Mild for many, although it is turning a bit colder tonight. The wet and windy weather tomorrow coming from this area of low pressure. This one's been bringing plenty of rain through the day today. Still some heavy downpours across northeast England, southeast Scotland this evening, but they're heading away out into the North Sea. A few showers across the southeast, but many places becoming dry and clear for a time. But here comes that next weather system bringing rain to Northern Ireland, West Wales by dawn, and the winds strengthening here too. Mild again in the southwest, but elsewhere a pretty chilly night actually, certainly compared to recent nights, and pockets of frost likely in northeast Scotland in rural areas. But should be a bright enough start here, dry and fine. We'll see some sunny spells, just a few showers in western Scotland. But head further south, the cloud already thickening, turning wet across Dumfries and Galloway for the morning rush hour. Really soggy start for Northern Ireland and heavy bursts of rain covering much of Wales and western England too. Much of the East Midlands and East Anglia in the southeast will have a dry and generally dry, fine start, which will continue for most of the day. But the winds will be picking up in the west. Have Met Office warnings in place for South Wales, southwest Scotland and for the afternoon southwest England, with another pulse of rain coming in here. We also have to keep an eye